Driving down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. It made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good.
Hello, how's it going? I'm Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme genderqueer spiritual drag artist and digital chaplain. And you have found yourself at Say Something, which is a time that I take once a week on Sundays at 3:33 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and talk for about 20 or 30 minutes on something that is on my mind. If you're not aware of who I am a queer chaplain, and I do a number of podcasts and have many conversations with people who do drag and people who are transgender, talking about their experience with spirituality and religion and their art and their transgender identity and all that sort of stuff. And so this is a series that I'm doing as part of my Trans Spirit podcast. So if you are unable to make this right now, I'm live on YouTube. But you might be coming across this later when we're not live, or potentially on a podcast in just audio format. Regardless of where or when you find this, feel free to engage with me in the comments, send me messages or whatever. I'd really love to hear from folks. My intention is really to, one, be able to begin to put my experience into words. This is a great process for myself. I tend to do better speaking rather than like writing things. And so this is an opportunity for me to speak to my experience with something, as well as potentially maybe you can identify with something that I'm sharing that might, aid you in your own journey and your own experience. So today is episode 3 of this season, and it is also 2 years that I've been on hormones. I started my transition more than a couple of years ago, as far as like socially and in my own mind and head and spirit. But as far as like choosing to take hormones to continue to affirm my experience of my journey with gender and just my spirituality. And so that was 2 years ago today. And I thought I would just take a moment to reflect on that a little bit. 2 years is not a long time, but it is a long time, and a lot has happened in that time frame. So just like a little bit of leading up to starting hormones 2 years ago. I had, how do I explain it? So I'd already been living in my own understanding of transness. I had been going by Bonnie Violet for probably about a year or so by that time. And I've been using she pronouns for nearly a decade now. So my transition, or I don't even know if transition, but my ability to own and live into and hold my transness has been a journey and an evolution over time. And so though it might have seemed like all of a sudden I was going by Bonnie Violet and all of a sudden I was trans, it didn't quite happen that way. And I think that that's probably a common experience potentially for folks, and maybe not for others, in kind of coming to decide on going on hormones and those sorts of things, or even just living into my trans identity. There was much of my life, and even up until I kind of was able to claim being a trans person, I often didn't feel like I was trans enough. And this is something that I hear a lot from people, that I'm not trans enough, whatever that means. I think we all have this ideal or this expectation, maybe, of what it means to be transgender, what it means to transition. And I think for many of us, we don't necessarily fit into that one narrative. Nowadays, thankfully, there's a lot of different narratives and there's a lot of different people living differently as trans people. And there's lots of opportunities, I think, for us to see ourselves in other people's experience. I know for me, a big part of me being able to come into the fullness of who I am today really took me being able to see myself reflected in others, in the ways that they presented themselves, in the ways that they spoke about their experience. Because I think life is all about, as I get older, I realize that my journey is really about becoming, and it's about becoming more of who I am and being able to be more connected with that. And who I am sounds a little, because like I have a soul, and my soul is who I am. My body and all this is just like, it's part of it, but it's not who I am. It is a way that I express myself. It is a way that I can communicate to the world and to myself, and even commune with God or my higher power in a way that that hopefully brings life and creates some sort of connection over like division. I do think that one of the things I've talked about last week, I mentioned in the previous Say Something, was this idea of like, was I born trans, or am I just trans now, or was it something that came later on in life? And that I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. And I don't think it really matters, but I think because I had that belief that I had to feel like I was a woman trapped in a man's body, I think that kept me from leaning into how I understand myself today. So, in talking about like not feeling trans enough, I remember feeling nervous about when I actually went in and met with my doctor. It was actually during COVID, so I wasn't actually able to go in and physically meet with my doctor. It was over telehealth. And I had actually already had scheduled an appointment before and had canceled it about 5 months prior to that. And so I kind of went back and forth on this decision of whether or not to even go on hormones to begin with. I was really fearful that I would lose people in my life, whether that was family, friends. I was concerned about how the world and how society and in general, how I would be received and how I would be able to navigate through it as a trans person and as identifying as one. And so I think that deterred me a little longer than what I thought, that there was this fear of whatever. And at some point in time, it just got to a point where I was more afraid um, to not transition or not try hormones or not try on this other parts of myself in order to see if they fit, rather than, waiting even further. I was already 40, and I just couldn't imagine, coming to having these questions and these wonderings and these thoughts for say 20 more years, and then being like, oh, yep, that's it. And then starting my process. Then I think whenever we get there, we get there. But I think there was a part of me that was just like, let's just see. I have always been a fairly intuitive and spiritual person, and mind person, more so than my body. My body has been a very difficult place for me to live in and to reside in and to feel really connected with. And so when it even came to my transition, I wasn't necessarily like, I had had experiences through drag where I had dressed more feminine, wore more feminine clothing, and was able to express myself in a more feminine way in which um, I felt, I just felt comfortable. I felt pretty. I felt sexy. I felt connected. I felt like I was inside my body. in a way that I hadn't been before. And so I had kind of those experiences of being able to like wear clothing a certain way, or kind of um, I don't know, just adorn myself in a way that felt more feminine, and to a degree that I felt like I hadn't really allowed myself much in my life. Um, and so as far as like the body changes go, I wasn't like necessarily I want to go on hormones so that I can have breasts, or that I can grow hips, or that I can all the sorts of things that happen with hormones. For me, it was more of an intuition. There was more of like an intuition, that having the hormones in my body would awaken something within me and within my body, that had been malnourished, or was just waiting to be given life. And I felt like this medication was going to do that. Um, and so I remember going into my appointment, and I was so nervous about not being trans enough, like that I wasn't going to be able to, because I feel like it feels like a gatekeeping process where you have to like go to the doctor and like prove that you're trans enough, or prove that you're like, it just feels like, or it felt like I needed to like say the right things or do the right things in order to really get what I want, or to be seen or to be heard in the way that I saw myself. And so I just had a lot of anxiety and fear that um, something was going to happen to where I wasn't going to be able to finally start this medication and start this part of my journey. Like I just felt like something might get in the way of it, and I was so concerned that that might happen. And so it wasn't really about an idea of like for myself, but more of like, am I going to be able to? Is the doctor going to see this in me? And of course, that all went away. It was really easy for me to share my experience with myself. There wasn't any pressure. There wasn't any like um, like it wasn't like I felt like I had to say things that weren't true. I felt like I was able to just like reflect on my journey up into that point. And I had so many indicators and so many experiences that just reinforced and affirmed how I'd come to see myself at this point in my life as a trans person. And so it was really easy to have that conversation actually with the doctor. And the doctor was very affirming by the end of the appointment. And I was really, really excited. I hadn't necessarily felt the excitement, or I hadn't labeled it excitement yet. I think sometimes anxiety can feel it, or even excitement can feel as anxiety or fear, or I think sometimes they're one and the same, where they can present in similar ways. And my understanding of what's going on might change. But I remember at that appointment just being so excited about starting hormones. And because I had taken so long to even get to the point to start, and I had canceled appointments, I just didn't want anything to stop me from going. And I remember when I met with her, I was like, okay, great. And then we decided to start hormones. And then she said, okay, well, read this paperwork, and then schedule a follow-up appointment. And then when you come in for your follow-up appointment, we'll make sure you still want to be on it. And then we'll go from there. And I was just like, what? I like freaked out. I actually started crying. I got really upset because I had really felt like I was ready to start then and now. And she and again, like that was one of the affirming things within me about how my body was reacting to what was going on in a way that I hadn't been fully, I think, able to connect to or present to. Sometimes I feel like those things have to happen to kind of affirm and tell me what's going on for me. But anywho, I went ahead and she said she put me on a list for cancellations. And then by next week, I was able to meet with her again and check in and start my hormones. And so I remember a year ago, it was April 16th, and I remember going to the pharmacy. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and going and picking up my hormones and my medication, my medicine. And I went to the pharmacy, and I had kind of figured, I felt like I really wanted to do something to really, something spiritual, something to really honor and kind of support this physical transition in like a spiritual way. And so I was able to connect with Linda Summers, who is a dear friend of mine. Angel we'd actually happened to cross paths um, on my way to the pharmacy, and they had went ahead and decided that they would be willing to, because we've been spiritual friends with one another in our journeys. We both have similar pasts and really seeking in similar ways. Um, and so she offered to pray on my medication. And so uh, we were in the Castro. And so we went to the Castro stop, just above the Castro stop. And I gave her my pills, and she prayed over them. Um, and then I felt like then there was some me time that I needed. And so she prayed over my stuff, which was really cool. And again, it wasn't planned, but it just kind of came together in a way that made a lot of sense. And it really made a lot of sense that it was her that did it for me and with me. That night I went home and I did kind of my own little, I set up my altar and I lit my candles and said some prayers, and I took my first dose of my hormones. My trans identity and me living into my transness is a spiritual awakening for me. I feel like it's an awakening to a part of me that I'm coming awake, I'm becoming awake to, I'm coming to be known, I'm coming to know more of. And so I've really tried to be really intentional or super connected to spiritual practice, even though many times I don't even know. Like, I feel like the more I've been in this journey, the less of an idea of what I know I think I know when it comes to God and everything. As in, I feel like I knew exactly, or I had religion, or I had certain ways and calling God and connecting with God. And some of those things have started to really come into question for me over the last few years. Not in the sense that stuff isn't true anymore, just that maybe I need to try something different. And so I feel like I have an experience with what I sometimes call God, just because it's easier. But really it's just, and the more that I've sought this sort of understanding, or sought more of this connection or intention, or been more aware of how I'm connected to all parts of myself, how I'm connected to you, how I'm connected to the rest of the world, to the land, to the creatures. And to me, like, God is what's in between all of that. God is what kind of holds it all together, allows space for us all to exist, but also connects us. So I feel like a lot of my journey is to be able to get to a point in my life, or continue to get to a point in my life, where I can live as if I know that to be true always. If I knew I was connected to all of these things, and we were one, and what I did impacted them, and I was well and aware and could do the things that how would I move through the world in a way that I guess would be best for more people. I guess I don't know. I guess just having some intentionality around that oneness, around that solidarity, that I think, that connectedness that I have within myself and I have with you. And so I feel like I'm getting a little heady with all of this. So I'll kind of pivot a little bit for whatever reason. I feel like talking about my experience with my body has been one of the biggest journeys, or the biggest, it's like the thing, I knew this was a physical aspect of my body and stuff, but I really wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, or as my body changed, I didn't know if I wanted those results. I do want to say though that I've been really happy for the most part with the physical changes that my body has gone through. And, in 2 years, they say 5 years is a good amount of time to be on hormones before things really kind of settle in, I think. And so I started off on a lower dose too. But within, a few weeks, I was certain that I wanted to just go full bore. I didn't go full bore right away. I didn't start I guess I would say just a whole dosing until the beginning of last year. So, anywho, they say that it takes about 5 years for, um, I don't know, I think for things just to kind of settle in a way that there might not be big growth or big changes. And so there's been times when my body just felt like it was two different bodies. But now I feel like I'm really coming into having one body. I've been loving to have curves and having, just to have curves and have more of a shape um, that feels like it suits me. Um, and I've been excited about growing breasts, and I've been, the hair thing is, something I'm still figuring out. you know, um, there's certain things that, transitioning at 40 versus something I could have done when I was younger. There are certain things that testosterone and life has already done to my body. And so um, there's only so much, that hormones will do to a person. But as it is, I've been really happy with the physical changes as well, which again was not something I was so sure that I would have. I'm happy to be not traveling so much. One of the challenges that has been in my transition this 2 years is I've also been doing a lot of travel. And so traveling while in transition has been really interesting in the sense of like, because as your body's changing and you're wanting to be seen different and people are seeing you not as you want to be seen, especially like in public settings and in situations where people probably wouldn't know those things about you. um, it kind of got interesting, and eventually airports got to be really difficult because the more I started to transition, the more I would kind of read more feminine, um, but also I had male identified things, and so and they had this thing where they pushed male button or female button as for security, and so it got to where they would click the female button, but then my body wasn't fully matching that. And so my there would be certain parts of my body that would show up to have things that they didn't expect to be there, and so then that led to like a lot of patting down and things like that. So it was really affirming in the sense that people would, I guess, pick a button that was more feminine and read me as more feminine, which is what I was searching for, but then kind of putting me through this other thing that the I guess the categories were reading something else, and so there was this kind of disconnection. And so it was this mixed bag of feeling affirmed and also um, then unaffirmed, and also then it created these really difficult situations where I had to get patted down in my private areas almost every time I went through, and it was always like this it was just a really uncomfortable thing, and sometimes I was able to just like be fine with it, and other times I found it very violating and humiliating at times to kind of go through that process. And so um, that's been one of, I think, the challenges. Also, I think a lot of my emotions have changed. There's been a lot of emotions and feelings and things that I have that I'm connected to, which is beautiful and great, but I didn't necessarily have the tools mentally, as well as I think just practices in life to really know how to, like, I had to learn how to adjust and how to work with these new emotions and these new feelings and these new sensations, and kind of figuring out how to respond to them or how not to respond to them, as in not letting it like take up whatever experience I'm having with to kind of, impact everything in my life in, say, a negative way or a difficult way. If I was feeling a little down or emotional, that I didn't let it keep me from doing what I needed to do that day or showing up for what I needed to show up for, where at times I wasn't able to do it because, again, I was dealing with these emotions that I had never really dealt with before. And I was in these environments and situations that I didn't have a lot of control in. So it's been definitely quite the journey. I would not I'm so grateful to be on this journey. Uh, and there are so many more pluses than, and even like when I'm talking about like these challenges or these differences, it's not even about like, I'm trying to say, like, it's just kind of like any other new thing. It's like when you, I don't like to equate it this way, but it's whenever you start to do anything new, you're going to have, you're just kind of these new experiences, and you're going to learn how to kind of adjust to them and work with what you have. And it's not in the sense that it's actually a bad thing that you're going through these challenges, I guess, but it's really just part of the process. And it's a necessary and good part of the process that can at times feel not so great, or can kind of slow us down or delay us or distract us. I don't know if anything good is coming out of this, but I really tried to put myself in a state of connected to myself and prayer and heart centered, to where I don't know. Sometimes, one thing that I've come to learn is that, or come to experience, is that, one, I mean, this is not that serious. I'm taking some time to share my experience. Maybe it's gonna be good, maybe it's not. Like, that's really irrelevant, especially over time. But I've found when I can just like not orchestrate too much of what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to get across, that that leaves more room for other things to be said and other things to be expressed that I may not have thought about, and that actually might end up landing on someone else a little bit more. Like, it might be something that they connect to. I remember when I used to travel around and talk with young people about my HIV experience, and how because I would literally sometimes talk to, 7 or 8 classes in a day, so hundreds of students in a day, or, over time. And you start to learn what people connect with and what they don't connect with. But I often found myself thinking like, oh, this is the thing I really want to drive home. And then they're not even connected on that. They're connected about the fact that I talked about, like, I made some random comment about maybe my favorite football team, or some experience I had with my dad or whatever. And that's the thing that somebody really connects to, that then everything else they're kind of open to as well. And so when it comes down to these moments when we get a little bit of time to be able to just share from our heart and our mind, I think that's where kind of the God stuff comes in, where we just say what we say what comes to our mind, and we talk about it, and then we put it out into the world, and whatever's done with it isn't necessarily none of my business. And I can just hope and trust that, like, when it lands on somebody else, or they come across it, whether it's you're listening to it right now, or it's something that you come across in a couple of months, or on Monday or Tuesday, or maybe not at all, like, it's really kind of none of my business. And so I've kind of learned that in a lot of recovery meetings over and over in support groups and things like that. You just share your experience and just let go and see what happens. And so that's kind of what this idea is around Say Something, is having an opportunity just to say what's on my mind, but also for me to try to, again, put words to my experience, to what's happening for me right now as best as I can. I'm feeling a little like today was a little different than maybe what I'd kind of hoped. It's like 2 years being on hormones is it's kind of a big experience. And so it's I don't know, I just feel like I could never probably speak fully and in a way that adequately conveys what my experience has been this last couple of years, with having access to medication and all the other things that have led to me, becoming more of who I am, and being the person today, and knowing myself in the ways that I know myself. And thank you so much, Otto, It's nice of you to say. I appreciate you popping in and saying something. Oftentimes I'm talking to no one live, and so it's always nice to hear from folks who happen to be listening. I'm right at the end of my time here, and check out, subscribe to my channels. I do a lot of different things where I love talking with other people about their experience with their transness or drag or spirituality and all that sort of stuff. So check out the links in the description if you're curious to know more about me, or, send me a message or anything like that. I'm not really sure what else to say. I do want to say thank you to my patrons who help me out on a monthly basis. All the work that I do like everything that I do. I do workshops, I speak, all these sorts of whatever. I work one-on-one with people around their transition. As a chaplain, I try to work around people in death and dying to themselves. Chaplains are usually with people with death and dying in the body. I feel like I want to be with people during the process of an identity shift. When we come to see ourselves differently, I think that's a death and that's a birth. And for some identities and some of the identities that I've held over my lifetime, I was told that my spirit or my spirituality was not something that I could access anymore, or that I was eligible for. And so when I was able to get to a space where I could invite and notice that my spirit and my understanding of God and everything was actually at play in the past and in my now, that it changed my experience of things, and it allowed me to heal and move forward in a way that helps me even now. And so I really love being with people who are going through that process of coming to see themselves differently, and just helping them invite or remember that they have a spirit, they have a soul, and it's a part of that process too. And they might do well to connect with community or just have space to talk about it in whatever way that you know and understand. Again, I just got to a place in my life where I got to a place in my life where I don't know where I was going with that, but anywho, I kind of lost my train of thought, and I'm at that 33-minute mark, so I do want to stop. So check out next week. You can hear me ramble on more or continue to say something. So take care. Have a great rest of your day. And until next time, bye-bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my dear.